Well, welcome back to the Teachers Lounge. Thank you, everybody who's able to join us live, and those of you who are going to listen on our podcast on Anchor. Today, we're going to be talking about labels, hot labels in education. If you've been in education long enough, and if you've been in education too long, you have heard labels come around, be recycled, change. They sound like stuff that was the same as 10 years ago or 2 weeks ago. And what we really want to talk about today are terms that are around social and emotional learning and those social skills. They might be called SEL, they might be called soft skills, it might be called AI proof skills. And some of those things that are like that, or some things that are dissimilar to that. Why are they hot button things now? Why do we care about them? Why are they being pushed by education, by other stakeholders? And if they are important to what students have to learn, how do we make sure that students are learning it? Are we not just teaching them content or the same old stuff under a different name? And so how do we do it if they need it? How do we do it effectively? And that's what we want to try to focus on today.
Thanks, Roz. That was a great intro. This is something I think that you and I have both struggled with for as long as we've known each other as teachers is, you have a classroom, you're in charge of your content or whatever is being mandated to you by whatever governing factor you have. And then they're like, well, just do an advisory because kids need to learn empathy. Or, hey, the kids just need to learn how to be compassionate. Or so-and-so got bullied yesterday. Why don't you just have a little conversation about it? And you're like, how am I teaching empathy and compassion in a vacuum in 10 minutes in the morning before my full day of classes? And that's something that teachers struggle with. It's not because they don't want to or that you don't understand the value of empathy or compassion, but how are you just throwing this at me right now? And then on top of it, so then you say that and your administrator goes, oh, I have the perfect plan. I bought you a book and you can read this script to your kids, and then your kids can do this activity where they throw a ball at each other's head, and then they'll really understand compassion. And you go, oh yeah, that's totally gonna fly with middle schoolers, right? A lot of this, and you and I have had this conversation so many times over the years, is how do you teach these interpersonal skills? I started calling them AI proof skills probably like last fall, because it was like working in Agile, bringing that into the classroom, really recognizing what was happening in the classroom. It was recognizing that these skills are the skills that are uniquely human, that get left off the table in so many instruction, and then they're forced into that advisory period. Like here, just learn empathy in 10 minutes. Let me know how that goes. Tell me the kids are empathetic and that we can, bring them to an assembly on empathy later. So just talking about these kinds of skills and how we're integrating them, so that they're actually meaningful, and they don't become joke terms to kids. They don't become where you hear the term and you roll your eyes, but that you actually learn them in practice, where they have context, where they become meaningful, and they can become part of your developing character, which is what we're really looking for, right? Especially with our kids in K-12. They're building character. We want them to build these skills out, to develop into better human beings, right? And so I think I said a lot, Roz.
No, and I guess the question, because there's a lot to unpack in that, right? So the question that I think I have is about, I think a lot of it centers on socialization, but after, we all experienced the dumpster fire that was COVID, whether it was in your workplace or particularly with kids in school, or if they were remote, everybody was worried about socialization of students. My issue was, and I'll talk personally, my daughter has a chronic illness, so I didn't want her in school. It was more dangerous for her to be there during COVID. But we got a lot of input from family and friends and other people. Oh, you need to make sure your daughter is socialized. She needs to be around other kids. And we knew that, but for us, her health came first for that time period. But the thing that always worried me was what kind of socialization is she getting from school? Because as a teacher in the classroom for as long as I've been, I know not all socialization is the kind that I want for my daughter. So if we're talking about what they are learning in school and the socialization, what this goes back to that question about what SEL is, what empathy is, how do they teach it, how do they get it? Is it only for 10 minutes in advisory? What kind of socialization are we trying to teach them? We definitely want to humanize school and make it so that they have skills to be able to communicate and function in society. But just socialization for the sake of socialization is not great. I mean, to be quite frank, if I'm in jail in general population and they let me out in the yard, I'm being socialized too, but that's not the kind that I want. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And so I guess my question is, what is the quote unquote right thing? And then how do we do that?
Can I just pause you for a second and go into something that you said? Because you mentioned COVID and you mentioned what you deal with your daughter and keeping her safe. But can I just like backtrack before COVID that we were taking kindergartners and making them, bless you, read and write and keeping them at their desks. So they weren't actually really socializing before COVID either. Exactly. And that elementary school has been pushed, middle school has been pushed into elementary school. And so our kids are like locked into chairs all day anyway. We really need to discuss like these skills, whatever you want to call them, they need to be developed. You're right. They need to be developed in a safe environment. But are we even giving kids the chance to do it, or is it just a free for all in the 20 minutes that they get to have lunch? Is there a better way to approach that?
I was going to say a minute ago in my experiences going back about 7-8 years ago, maybe even 9 or 10 years ago, when we started looking in industry, how we were getting people to collaborate in teams. One of the big challenges we had is, okay, well, how do you treat people with respect? How do you get welcome and open to ideas, right? When the movement in industry started changing to it's no longer a competitive environment. It's now a collaborative environment. I'm not surprised that years later it shows up in school as, oh yeah, we need to make sure we're teaching kids these skills. Why? So that when they get out into industry, they now know how to do this.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yep. Does anybody else?
I'll just kind of jump in just on that point of kindergartners. I was not familiar in all of my years in ed tech firsthand with Montessori education, but my wife had done Montessori and really recommended for our kids starting at 18 months, the Montessori education. And the science says basically 18 months to 6 years old is this spongy window of, letting the kids play-based learning, guided learning, whatever you want to call it, where they have that ownership to choose what they're working on, work with other kids, play with other kids. If they want to paint every day for 30 days, they get to paint and they get to do that. And I've seen it now. Our kids started 18 months, they're almost 6. Unbelievably just thoughtful. They clean up after themselves. They take on independence and initiative. So I think, a universal Montessori pre-K would be unbelievably valuable for generations to come. There are a lot of other thought leaders much more in tune with all the research, but something like that. Or I think we're finally starting to see a lot of elementary schools and early childhood programs just borrowing from the Montessori model, right? It doesn't have to be full on Montessori, but they're borrowing from, and we're seeing a lot more play-based learning where they're not just learning academically, but they're learning socially, they're learning practical life skills, they're learning how to navigate the world at these very young ages. And it's just exciting to see the benefits of that throughout their whole lives, instead of having to remediate some of these SEL issues in elementary or even middle school or even high school, because they didn't get that at the youngest ages. So I know there's not one answer to this, but I feel like something at the earliest ages is going to help, kind of an ounce of prevention for these problems later in life. that we still need to address head on at all levels. But it's exciting to see firsthand how that process works. And I'm hopeful that there'll be more of a movement towards Montessori, or the best of Montessori, in public education moving forward.
And so, JW, what you're talking about too is that, Montessori is incredible. And the teachers have to be trained a certain way, and it has to go into a certain level. So you have to have teachers that are dedicated. You have to pay more to have actual certified teachers instead of just people that can fill that role. But a huge part of Montessori, and Roz was mentioning this earlier, is not just socialization. In Montessori, you're learning independence, you're learning self-reliance, you're learning self-respect. You clean up after yourself. You're learning how to make decisions. You're learning how to prioritize your work because you can't do it all at the same time. There's so many of those things that you're learning in Montessori that's not like, hey, go outside and go hit a ball, which is awesome. Also awesome. But there's so many other things that are built into Montessori that give those kids that really strong core of character by the time that they're 6. If you have a 6-year-old that can advocate for themselves, it's incredible. And that's the kind of stuff that Montessori gives. I'm sorry, Simon.
Well, it just, the basic physics of that we teachers observe is there's a faster cycle time for social interactions in those sorts of learning environments. The environments are fundamentally structured to be, pull, not push. And so it's like, hey, you're going to experiment through the curriculum, your socialness, and you're going to get short feedback loops on being a jerk. Of course, those kids get it quick because it's, and I love the spongy window. That's exactly what it is. And if you can get like 3 drops of Montessori on that sponge, then those kids will be great because they do learn it fast from a really, well-toned environment. So I just totally agree with all that. So good to hear that.
And the last thing is, I think it's really interesting how they do 18 months to 3 years old together, and then 3 to 6, so that they get to be the youngest, and then the middle, and then the oldest in that same experience. So they get to know how to interact with older kids. They get to be in the middle where they're helping younger kids, but also not the oldest. And then they get to be the oldest helping everyone. And just their grace and courtesy and those kind of core character things was really interesting to see how they got all of those experiences instead of just being with kids within 12 months of their age the whole time, where it was like, oh, well, these are these kids and these are those kids. And you kind of get your identity of that type of kid. Whereas when you have a bigger grade band at the younger ages, I don't think that would work as you get older. You do get those different life experiences at a young age. I think have been really valuable for our kids.
I love Montessori, and I wish there was better ways to get it into more of the public's hands. You get more people exposed to it, or there's been like a pop in Montessori toys that have been big in the market, but teaching parents how to like get out the mat. Like maybe if it came with a little instruction manual, like get out the mat, take a toy, put it away, like that kind of thing that you model. And for 3-year-olds or even 18-month-olds, they pick up so quickly on habits. They develop habits so quickly that you only really have to show them 3 or 4 times. And then they have these incredible skills. And I love, we are advocates of students pulling their information as they need it. So not necessarily being stuck in a grade, but going to where their skill level is and maybe a little bit above where their skill level is. So they're having to, find that struggle a little bit, not being kept in a box just because of the year they were born in. But it's an excellent experience knowing what it's like to be the youngest, struggling up through that because you think the big kids are so cool, and then getting to be the leader. Like there's something extraordinary about that arc within the first 6 years of your life, because how many of us get to do that within the first 30 years of our life, really?
Forever. Yeah
Because and that's the thing is and so you have those leaderly habits of mind established in a short 3-year cycle, and by the end of it, if your teachers are straight with you, you're going to have some real budding mastery of yourself, and that will be an asset to every teammate you have the rest of your life.
Something that a couple of you have touched on is, and this can be for a later conversation as well, is that I wonder sometimes we limit students Like in Montessori, they can play with different games, they can do different skills. But sometimes we try to limit the conversations that kids can have because we claim that they are not ready, but we're not ready. You know what I mean? So I wonder if some of the skills and games and stuff that they play, maybe we should let them, because I'm sorry, if you watch TV or on social media for 10 minutes, you know the adults in the room suck at communicating and talking about difficult things too. So maybe we should let them learn at an early age those difficult topics that we're too afraid to talk about because they do it a lot better. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think I'll go back and then I'll speak to what you just said. We tend to think about all of these things just like kind of X, Y axis, and everything is either, okay, here's the information that they need to get, and then here's when they need to get it, and somewhere in there is how, but we lack some of the depth. To your point, adults already suck at these things, and so because they suck at these things, they can't necessarily inform young people on how to do it. And if we took, I use the word spirit a lot because it really is, like a ways of being type thing. If we can get more adults to say, wow, I can actually learn a lot from young people, it changes the whole dynamic. My nephew is 18 months old, and when I watch him pick up something and try to figure it out and stuff, I can't fully explain how I'm getting smarter, but I swear I am. Like I'm watching him do a thing, and the level of curiosity that he's bringing to it, and how he's figuring out that problem. I'm like, my own brain kind of gets to turning. So if it's just, and this is the conversation that we go, with all the time. The system is just it's artificial. They have this natural way of operating, this natural way of doing things. They're going to ask, whatever question, whenever. Maybe we'll be good at answering it, maybe we won't. But their ability to handle it is more aligned with what we can communicate. If we can communicate it at their level, that probably means we know it a little bit better than we might not actually really know it. I mean, so we might have work to do to ensure that young people get to the places that they need to be. So it's just another area where the constraints that of the system are just so they seem insurmountable at the high level, but at the low level, when you're just in front of a child and it's just you and them, whether it's a classroom setting or wherever it is, the ability for young people to get that pull and walk towards whatever it is that they want. They walk into a building and then we just put something right in front of it and say, no, you can't go that way. You're going to do this. You're going to do it the way that we want you to do it. You're going to do how, and then we wonder why at some point in time this self-directed thing that they get to do all of a sudden turns into something that they don't care about. And the last thing I'll say on this is, because it just came up yesterday, I'm on my local school board, and we're going through our new strategic plan, and I'm excited about a lot of things in there, and a lot of stuff is right, and when we get to a particular point that's about self-directed learning, and it's positioned only for our ALP student, advanced students, so they get to do something self-directed, and they get to do that when they're in 11th and 12th grade, and then they have this small piece of extended learning time that everybody else over the course of the next 5 years will have some access to. So we are agreeing that, wow, it's good to have them self-directed, but let's let them do it 5% of the time as opposed to 80% of the time, and then 20% let's govern the way that they go.
I agree with that. And just to add on to what you two have both been speaking about, I'm a history teacher and a civics teacher for the last 12 years. Think about the ride I've had. I let my kids completely control their learning. And I always, before I was an Agile teacher, I did. So we would always do from, and I've taught 5th grade to seniors in high school, do current events. And usually I say, like, here's 3 topics in the news, pick something. Or I say it's like a free for all, pick something. They can do anything but crime, entertainment, and sports, because they have to read real news. And I have had conversations with kids that, like, mind blowing. the things that they come because they don't know who to talk to about this, but the news is always on in the background and the news is coming over their phone and they're confused about what's going on and what's going on in the world. And really all it takes is for you. Like, I read a lot of news sources so I can present news in two different forms. So I can say, this side tends to believe this side tends to believe that. It's up to you what you decide. You know, this is a conversation you need to have with your parents if it gets extra spicy. Like, I can't give you an opinion. That's not my job. I don't teach morals. That's your parents' decision. But like, you can talk and tell me your opinion and I can sit here and listen to you. And that space is really needed because I can tell you that I first planned that as a way to make sure I had a grade in the grade book every year. As a first year teacher, I was so nervous about making sure that I was doing things correctly. It turned into one of the things that I am best known for as a teacher is that it's current event days. So today is the day after the State of the Union address. I have old students that are messaging me, asking me questions about the State of the Union. You know, I don't teach there anymore, but they're like, I think this and I think that. And I go, that's a good thought. I like hearing you. What else do you think about that? And you know, giving them that space to have choice and to behave like an adult, to respect them, that they are a human being. They're just a little younger, and they can have opinions on these things, or that they're looking just to have somebody hear them and not judge them or not say you're right or you're wrong. It's such a huge thing that we don't allow really anywhere in these other spaces. And I don't know about other history classrooms, but you know, it's not a discussion that you're usually having in reading or other subjects as well. So I think we need to build that in. It doesn't have to be a top-down thing either. You know, like Jamal was talking about, like it's a Friday. It's a Friday activity in my class. It's not mandated by the district. It's not a bunch of red tape. It's just a way that your students can feel valued in the classroom. And they're developing those skills. They're developing what's literate about like news literacy. They're listening to each other's opinions. They have to figure out how to talk to each other, how to disagree with each other, how to actively listen. And those are huge things. And I can tell you, back to what Roz said, I would rather discuss very tough political questions about a variety of things with a bunch of middle schoolers than I would a bunch of people my age. Because my middle schoolers will be more polite. They will listen, they will consider what is being said, and they will respond respectfully. And that is a whole lot better than if I brought up the State of the Union when I walked into Publix later. Like
100%.
It's amazing.
100%. I will, only because I'm science, I will say this as well. What I do, I just started trying to implement it, a version of what Jessica does, but for science with my kids, lab activity Fridays. So instead of me planning a lab at the end of the unit, because I'm virtual, it is a little more difficult to try to do that. And so I ask them every Friday, what do you want to do for the following Friday? And you get a ton of these ideas. But what they also learned, what some of the classes learned is, okay, I had these great ideas, but if we don't coordinate and if we don't plan it and if we don't communicate, we don't do anything on Friday. So that is also teaching them a skill. So you can't have all of these great ideas in your workplace or in your community, and then you don't organize to get it done. And so they are learning a lot of skills with that as well. Yes, I want all the fun stuff. Now, how do I plan it? How do I make sure it happens? Because my students are in North Carolina. I'm in Florida. I can't bring in the materials. So they have to organize it and plan it. And all but one of my classes learned that lesson last week. And that one class had a ball and everybody else heard about it. And so now, guess what? Now they have a plan for this Friday. So those skills, they are working on those too, but it's also the skill of speaking up and advocating for yourself. You don't want to do these kind of traditional assignments every Friday. Speak up. What do you want to do? Because I asked them, okay, great. What lab activity do you want to do? It's crickets. They never are ready to speak up for themselves because we're always telling them what they have to do. And I told them, guys, literally, I'm bored out of my mind. What do you want to do? So it has to be related to this unit to show me that you understand it. But as long as it doesn't burn down the school and doesn't get me fired, we're going to go for it. So what you got? And then the ideas flow.
Yeah, so I mean, we started our pilot of the Student Action Board, which is all about getting student voice, actually on Monday. So I went down to my daughter's school and we sat with a class of about 20 students. It was really 19 girls and one boy, which was crazy to me. But we started out with the prompt. You know what I mean? What do you like? What do you don't? What do you like about school? What don't you like about school? And how do we make it better? And then boom, 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 all of these things on the board. Half an hour later, and they're like spicy with it and in their head. And I'm like, wow, okay. And I'm learning things about the school that I didn't know. And I'm just like, wow, that's crazy. I stopped at one point and said, hey, has anybody ever, asked these questions to you? And this was a class of 10th to, I'm sorry, 9th to 12th graders. And, two of them, girl, everybody said no one had ever asked them these questions. It's mind-boggling to me that somebody can come to 12th grade and no one has ever asked them what do they think about what's happening in school. And then we wonder how they could possibly not be engaged in our stuff that we decided, for them. It is nonsensical. It's just nonsensical. I wish that we could, I don't know, like I don't know if everybody remembers In Living Color, but I want that little sock thing where I can walk around and just be like, yo, homie, don't play that. Like, we're not doing that anymore, because people need something like that to wake up.
Yeah, because that sort of self-organizing, that sort of taking control of your life and what's around you is terrifying to systems that rely on dominance to organize people. And so it's a really different thing. Like, having been a leader of an organization, when the rug gets pulled out from under you because someone's self-organized underneath you and you didn't know about it, that gets awkward. But the minute you get good communication up from the ground floor of the classrooms, as long as they're reporting up, you can move super fast, super far. But you have to get that trust, those trust networks built in the school, and that's not easy to do. But when you can do it, when the kids get in there, because those 3 questions with that response, that's an intervention anyone can run in any school. You just need a leader to have the courage to be like, we're going to self-organize here in this little small risk-bound way. Here you go. Here's the question to ask your class. And then you just practice listening. Like, the interventions are not expensive. It's just got to get some switch turned somewhere.
Well, you also have to have the chutzpah to follow through, because, we've seen these things where you ask the kids, we've seen it, Roz and I have, where you ask the kids a bunch of things and then the admin goes, that's cute, like, cross it off the list, and then they ignore it. And then the kids are like, why did you waste my time? And I think a lot of it comes to this mindset. And we talk about mindset a lot, but a real mindset, we need a shift that children are just human beings, just with less years. I was just talking to this about my coach in my room. She's a 22-year-old. She's looking to be a teacher. This is her first year in a classroom. And she was like, those boys over there, I thought they were going to be such a problem. But like, I talked to them and you talked to them, and like, we gave them some choices and they're like the best kids in the class. And I'm like, yeah, especially with our ADH kids, especially with our rambunctious boys, all they want to do is be recognized. All they want to do is have trust. They want to be heard. And then they're perfect. Like, those boys are the best boys for me, the best students for me. And it's because you have to talk to them like they're humans, like you would talk to someone else, or like you would expect to be talked to. And for some reason in education, we think it's okay to speak down to people because they're shorter than us, and not give them choice and take away those things that we would never think of doing to other adults. I would never speak to another adult the way that I see teachers speak to children, not in a bad way, not that they're trying to, but taking away that, taking away their individuality, I guess, or taking away the respect that comes with being a human that you just don't treat children with.
It's essentially to express as an adult, you are not my peer as a human.
Yeah, and it's not an age thing. It's like,
nope.
It's just humanity. Like, then we talk about this a lot. Bring humanity back to education. They're just tiny humans.
Yep. That's the basic. That's the whole basis of lean, human-centered design, human-centered learning design.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing. I was recently at a superintendent's conference in Texas, and was interviewing some of the biggest district superintendents in our state. And something really struck me. One of the superintendents said, are we doing the best thing for the kids? Or are we doing the thing that makes the adults in the room feel comfortable? And he said, that's something that I preach from the superintendency down to the district administration, to the principals, to the teachers. And I wish more superintendents, more leadership would have that and live that themselves, so that the teachers would feel empowered to make those right decisions for their kids, and not the easy decision or the comfortable decision. I think it comes right back to having those tough conversations or bringing up those hard topics, is giving them that permission. And so hopefully anyone listening today, just know that there are leaders out there that do believe that. And if your leaders don't, you got to take it upon yourselves to live that way, because especially now, I've said it in probably past episodes, you as a teacher have this leverage you've never had before. There's a huge teacher shortage. They are not going to fire you. If they do, you will get a better job at the district next door and make more money. So as long as you're doing right by your kids, following your passions, not everything you try is going to work. You're going to fail some, but you're going to learn from it and keep going and putting the kids first. You can't go wrong, and you're going to make the teaching profession what it was meant to be in the first place. So don't just do it for yourself, do it for all the other teachers, do it for all those future teachers that need to see you as a role model. But hopefully we see more of this shift of district administrators saying, you know what, are we doing what's best for the kids? Are we doing what makes the adults in the room feel comfortable? And I think that needs to go to board members, that needs to go to, community members, to partners, to parents. If we can all have that mindset, then these tough conversations are going to be more accessible for the kids, and the kids are going to benefit from it.
100%. Absolutely. And
Nice
that's
to hear.
such a powerful question. Yeah, such a powerful question. Go ahead, Jess.
Oh, no, I was just saying it's so nice to hear from an administrator from the top down asking you to do what's best for your kids, instead of, are you getting us our federal dollars? Like, are you actually paying attention to the health and well-being of your students? Are you looking at their development? That's exactly what our career should be. And I just had that, my neighbor is a nurse, and I was like, being a nurse is so sweet. You guys are in a shortage and they treat you so nicely. I wonder when that's going to happen to teachers. And I think that you're 100% right, JW, because Roz and I took that roll of the dice, and it's worked out very well for us because of the same things, is that we wanted to be innovative, and we wanted to try new things. And it was not in an environment that was looked kindly upon. And so we found environments that it would be, and it is successful, because now I'm not commuting to work. So there's lots of options out there in the educational world where you can still work with students and still do good things and still be a pioneer in the things that you want, and a leader, and try new things and test new things, because teachers bring value to the environments they're in, especially good teachers, and the teachers that are really teaching from the heart and are looking to bring the kind of skills that we're talking about today. But those future ready skills, how are we, knowing that hitting every point on the rubric is not the more important thing, is the collaboration, is the empathy, is the public speaking, all of those skills, the creativity. Can you ask a question? Like, that's a huge one for me. Can you actually ask a question besides, can I go to the bathroom and is this graded? The majority of our kids cannot. That's a skill that has to be retaught because we lost it. Those kind of teachers will have success no matter where. Sorry, Roz.
And I just want to jump in. It's not that they lost it, it's that it was beaten out of them. Because when they raise their hand to ask a question, they're told, okay, wait, no questions, just write it down, get it till it's done. And when you hear that, even as another adult, you're like, oh man, what a lost opportunity. I mean, that literally crushes my soul, because I was that student in that other teacher's class that was told that. And I was a nerd. I always had questions. I got on my parents' nerves asking questions. So imagine what I did in school. But I had a teacher, a science teacher, which is probably why I'm a science teacher now. She loved it. And that was the class that I try to recreate every single day, every single year. It matters.
It does. It really does. And I was the same way as you. It was why. I got on everybody's nerves. And it's like when I work with kids, I almost never get that frustration because I know that people got that frustration with me. Like you can ask why as many times as you want. I do try to help them to not, like my niece sometimes she'll act like she doesn't know something that she knows. And so you know what I mean? And I kind of can look at her face and recognize like, you know, the answer to that. So I try to get her to not do that. But I haven't even read the article yet, but the headline relates to what we talked about last week. Talking to AI might be the most important skill of the century is an article that just came out in the Atlantic. So I look forward to reading it. And part of that talking is what questions are you asking the tool? And so you're going to be better at communicating with that AI if you were allowed to ask a variety of different questions and you were taught, the art of asking beautiful questions, from a very young age.
To fill in on what Jamal was saying, the ability and teaching kids the art of asking why. Right, those are the students who, when they enter the workforce, they'll look at a process or a system and go, wait, why does that work that way? And they're not doing it from the aspect of necessarily going, oh, I need to understand everything, but it's usually because they're seeing something as an opportunity for an improvement. And they're trying to just find out from everybody if anybody can answer those questions. The students who are taught to not ask those questions of why generally turn into becoming the leaders who answer the question of because it's always been done that way.
That's my favorite phrase of all time. I don't know if you guys can notice. I once read in a book, so this isn't mine. I stole this from somebody else and I can't remember who. If I remember, I'll let you know. But I asked this of my kids, my two children every day is, what's the best question you asked in class today? So like I asked them what they did. And I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old and both of them go, nothing. I colored, I played soccer. What did you have for lunch? I had muffins. Like they have nothing to say. And then I go, okay, well, what's the best question you asked today? And then they really have to think. And then all of a sudden, everything that they learned comes tumbling out of them because they have to really go back and retrieve it. And it's a game that we play, like who asked the better question in the car ride home. And I can't remember what book I got that from, but that was like just like reading a more beautiful question was like a light bulb moment in my life. That one exercise was another light bulb moment in my life where I was like, like we need to do this everywhere.
Yeah, because it's like a cognitive bicep curl. You work and then you let it go, and then you reflect. Right? Plan, do, check, act. It's the OODA loop. Your teacher got you doing those reps and getting joy from the reps, and that's what good teachers do.
And it's not asking the right question or the wrong question. It's asking the best question or the better question or the next question, which I think is training our kids for that stamina of going deeper versus did I get it right or wrong? Did I ask the right question? No, we always say there's no wrong questions, but I love that like there's always a better question or a best question or a next question.
And I mean, what popped into my head there, and I believe I've said this in the space before, is just the idea of the way that we look at grades, where if you don't get 100, you're or 90, you're wrong. Like you got these things wrong, as opposed to if you get 10 right, you got 10 right. You know what I mean? Now let's go about getting 20. It's a whole different a feeling for a young person to say, oh snap, I'm stepping up this ladder, versus I haven't reached the peak and we're only thinking about the peak. We haven't talked about the movement up, and the enjoyment of the journey, that questions often allow you to take.
Roz and I have been working on this a lot lately, is the idea of wide open questions as opposed to essential questions or driving questions. Like you were raised knowing an essential question, but they're always tied to content. And there's always like a right answer, like, why what were some of the causes of the Revolutionary War? Like there's defined answers for those things. And so what we've been working on is the idea of a wide open question, like a question that's real world applicable, that has to do with your content. You can apply your content, but then the kids have to reach back into their schema and figure out like their own unique solution to this answer. And so it immediately gives the students purpose, because now they see why they're learning the things that they're learning. They can see how it applies to the real world. So like they know you're not wasting their time, because that's another thing with treating children like human beings, is like, stop wasting their time. They know you're wasting their time. But these ideas that, you're giving them wide open questions, so there's no singular answer. So Roz comes up with an idea, and I come up with an idea, and Simon and Jamal and JW and Tori and Jeff, we all have different solutions to this problem. And that's fine, because they're all legitimate in some way, as long as we applied our knowledge or we could show our process through it. You know what I mean? So we're working through kind of defining that a little bit more, but that's like our next big thing, because I think there needs to be that change of right and wrong as to, no, take the information, apply it, show us your process, and then like, let us see where your unique mind takes us to solve this problem.
Yeah, because it's a non-determinist question. It's saying don't be a determinist, let's be a curiosityist and look for multiples, possibles, variants first, and then decide what you think later.
It takes that time. It takes that testing. Like, is this going to work? Like, what's the, and it's non-Googleable. You should see kids try to Google these questions and their heads just explode, because they're like, Google doesn't have, like, I know, there's not an answer. It's weird.
Can you give an example of one of those questions? Because I'm having a hard time with it.
Oh, so go, Roz.
No, like a couple. One that I love that Jessica did, and I'm sorry, I always steal your thunder with this, where you said, how can you create a more just society? But that I'm messing up the question. What was your question?
How do you distribute power for a just society? Or like in my civics course, I asked, like, my question for the entire year is, can one government meet the needs of a diverse population? So can it? Or like a science one is like, Roz and I are working on something like this, like, how might we recycle iPhones so that you don't have to continue to hurt the earth? Like something like that, like that was a little deterministic. I don't like to have judgment in them. Usually I have to refine. It goes through a refinement process though, so that like your bias doesn't show on the question though,
Exactly.
So.
And that's the tricky part. And if you've hit it, if you have a good question, if you share it with other adults, and we look like deers in the headlights, but imagine that warm and fuzzy feeling when you do it with kids. And you got them. And it's like you can hear crickets, and you can actually hear the wheels turning in their head. And you just sit there and you're like, yeah, this is the sweet spot. And then they just start checking, and they start asking questions, and then they start fighting with each other. And no, I'm going to do this question. And well, I'm going to check this, and I'm going to check that. And I'm like, that is awesome. And then especially if they're asking and checking directly opposing ideas. That is the best, because then they're going to go at it. So you got it good if they don't have like a few answers or possible answers in a few minutes. And they're like, but I don't like it, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And you're like, yes, it is the best if they come up with like 10 other questions based off the first one that you got.
Right.
And that's where like that teaching of questions, because they start with that big question, then you have to teach them how to break it down into smaller questions so they can start somewhere. So like, what's the difference between open questions and closed questions? Start with the closed questions, get a little bit of information, start to make decisions, then you up your question, so it like builds into that questioning model, which like is the real critical thinking, because how would you solve a problem as an adult? Like, I don't know how to change my oil. How would I start there? Like I have to, and just like you said, Jamal, I have to put it into some kind of AI to prompt some kind of information that's a real world situation you're going to find yourself in.
I mean, the great thing I like about where you guys are going with this is that there's so much, there's power in naivete. And that there's power when they don't know what they don't know. So they say something where our brain has a constraint on it. We wouldn't even think of it, and they let it out, and then we can be like, wait, what? Like they can literally help to solve the problems that are going on in the world right now. If we had a better way to then take that incredible question and weave it to someplace else. I'm not even sure how to illustrate like how you take that young person's answer, but what if schools did look like that? Where we are. We're think tank, we're action tank, you know what I mean? Or the things that are making the world a better place are coming out of the place where the people who are going to be in charge of this stuff are actually sitting and exist today.
Well, Jamal, let me tell you what some of my kids' solutions were with the how should power be distributed in a just society. I had kids do a mock-up of an app so that they could directly communicate with their representatives in Congress to tell them how to vote on bills. I had kids that created a nonprofit for the homeless community in Fort Lauderdale as a way to sell merchandise on the beach to tourists to help fund better facilities for our homeless population. I mean, I had kids that wanted to redesign, like they took the budget of the local school district and redesigned the school district and reallocated money in a real budget to buy better teachers. They decided superintendents didn't need 6 digits and that the teachers needed more money. Like these are the things that 8th grade kids learning about social contract theory thought up themselves within 6 weeks. And they did mock-ups of all of it. And then that's their solutions. Whereas you would ask an adult and, it's just like if I wanted to have a State of the Union conversation in Publix, like you would just get people screaming at each other. These kids came up with viable solutions to an equal distribution of power in society.
So think back to the backward bicycle, right? Knowledge and understanding are 2 different things. As adults, we have tons of knowledge, little understanding. As students, they can see the world in a much different way. They have a tremendous amount of understanding, and they simply just need some pieces fixed into it. They do not have to unlearn or rewire their brains because they have no preconceived ways that problems can or cannot be solved.
All right, guys. So it looks like we are at our time box again. I love having conversations with you guys because we could go on all day, just kind of like to run our mouths. But we know you guys have a lot of other things to do, as do we. So we want to thank you so much for your opinions on this and sharing them with us. You guys gave us great.
Maybe our next show should be about questions, Roz.
It totally should be about
Everybody want to talk about questions?
Yeah, and Jamal, I am going to give you a heads up. I told them after you left last time that we are totally going to have you back so you can chat more about ChatGPT and all the AI stuff that you're doing. So keep doing it because you're going to teach all of us and then more teachers who are watching. So and
I think Simon's bringing some special guests to talk about that too. So we're going to get hardcore on AI soon.
If you enjoyed this conversation and want to be a part of the next one, please make sure you join us on the Teachers Lounge, especially as we do a deeper dive into AI and education.